This podcast is brought to you by the friendly people at Crembo Baked Goods, the San Francisco Bay Area's newest parve non-dairy kosher bakery, proudly serving cookies, loaf cakes, and the best gluten-free challah I've ever had, and much more. Ask about their challah delivery service to schools, organizations, and corporations in the Bay Area. Email them at orders@crembobakedgoods.com for more info, or simply go to Crembo, that's Krembo, bakedgoods.com. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Holy Sparks podcast. Saul K here, super excited and very grateful for yet another quality guest on the show. And without further ado, let me introduce and edify the man properly. Michael Hunter Ochs has quietly established himself as one of the most versatile songwriters in America today. His song, In Her Eyes, was recorded by international superstar Josh Groban. The soul-filled On My Knees was awarded Song of the Year honors from both the Gospel Music Association Dove Award and the Nashville Songwriters Association International, and spent 14 weeks at #1. Michael's music has been attached to numerous feature films and TV shows, including Downsizing, Matt Damon, My Super Ex-Girlfriend, Uma Thurman, The Terminal, Steven Spielberg, and The Simpsons. His songs have appeared on albums with worldwide sales in excess of 20 million units. He has served as composer in residence at Congregation Micah in Nashville, Tennessee, and East End Temple in New York City for a combined 25 years. Every Friday evening, congregations around the world rejoice, reflect, and draw closer singing his songs. Holy brother, welcome to the Holy Sparks podcast.
It's great to be with you, Saul. Really appreciate the invitation.
I know that you have a wildly busy touring schedule right now, but before we get to that, I want people just to get to know you a little bit, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about where you grew up and specifically your Jewish background and upbringing.
Sure. Thanks again for the invitation. I've been following you guys, and I'm so glad it worked out that we're in the same time zone. We're usually 9 hours apart. Yeah, I grew up well, my dad was raised Orthodox, and so whenever we were with my grandmother on that side, it was super, super traditional Jewish family life. And then we grew up in a very conservative synagogue with an Orthodox rabbi, conservative synagogue, but Orthodox rabbi, no instruments, no full-time cantor, just cantor on the high holidays. And so, yeah, I didn't grow up with the Jewish camp life and Jewish camp music. I grew up in this really conservative Jewish congregation, but I loved uh, these melodies without instrumental backing, and it just, for me, and we had the cantor primarily on the high holidays, and that's kind of how I could mark the years. One year ends, another year begins by hearing those melodies. And so growing up like this, I never even thought about writing Jewish music. I thought Jewish music were these old melodies. At one point, I did end up switching to get my Jewish school education leading to the bar mitzvah. My friends were going to the Reform synagogue. My brother's friends were at the conservative. He got his Jewish education at conservative. I was like, I want to be with my friends. So I got the education at the Reform synagogue, did get introduced a little bit there to Debbie Friedman's music, but I had my bar mitzvah at the conservative synagogue and studied for my bar mitzvah with the Orthodox rabbi. So it was this mishmash. And but still never thought about writing Jewish music until much, much, much later when you mentioned this winning the Gospel Music Award for Song of the Year, the Dove Award. So this is a Christian music Grammys kind of thing. And I got to Nashville to write more. I was thinking of country music a little bit, and there's also pop music there. And the first song I got asked to write, I thought I was writing a song just that was going to be used in a church scene in a movie. And the movie ended up not getting made. And my co-writers were Christian writers, but I didn't at this point know so much about it. And I was still living in New York, and they said, "Hey, there's this young Christian singer, her debut album, and she heard the song and she really wants the song. I said, okay. And a year later, bottle of champagne appears outside my door in Nashville. I'm now renting a little place, and it says, "Congratulations on your nomination." I have no idea what's going on. I get an invitation in the mail to go to an awards dinner. I'm from New York. I thought this could have been some sort of scam. I don't know what's happening. And the song had taken off and was everywhere. It was around the world.
Okay, hold on. We're
Yeah,
getting way too far into the story. That's such good content, and I want to get to it, but I want to
yeah,
bridge the worlds just real quick. So just rewinding a second,
yes.
and maybe I missed this. Where exactly physically did you grow up? What part of
New
the world?
York, New
Okay, New York.
York.
Okay, great. Okay, so
Um,
you had this really what I would call unique, pluralistic Jewish life, which I'm a
hmm
big fan of pluralism for many reasons, because I think that that's the world. We live in a pluralistic Jewish world, right?
hmm
We all move in and out of these different little enclaves, but it's so. I think that was wise on your family's part. Conservative, Reform, Orthodox, all of those were operating in your life, which I think is what makes you super well-rounded, conceptually. But there's this little gap there between
Yeah,
New York and Nashville. So
yeah.
kind of walk us through, beginning music, playing
Okay.
music. Did you start on piano? Just bridge that gap for us.
Yeah, my dad was an amazing classical pianist and pop pianist, and he worked his way through law school and college, playing huge gigs like with Zero Mostel and Red Buttons up in the Catskills. So I always heard music, and I'm mostly self-taught on piano. I started um, taking some lessons later on. But I ended up, I was at NYU Music School, then I switched to a philosophy major, philosophy of ethics and morality. And then I got an invitation to go down to Nashville by my brother for his graduation. And I had the name of one songwriter in Nashville and one like producer guy. Went down, loved it, started meeting other writers. But one of the first songs I wrote was this song about the power of prayer for what I thought was a movie. And the interesting part of this is a rabbi there who I had met at this point, he heard about this. You wrote this Christian music song of the year. He's like, well, why don't you write me some new Jewish music? So that song was the bridge to a rabbi, Rabbi Ken Cantor, pushing me to write Jewish music. If I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't written that song, if I would have made the connection. And I remember though, when I met these Christian writers, I thought, wow, this is amazing because they can actually write Christian music and maybe, study a passage of, well, in our case, Torah, but maybe they were reading the New Testament and write a song about it. And then there's this whole way to get the music out there. And then this rabbi asked me to write something for Shabbat there, and I became the composer in residence in Nashville. And I played the first piece there, and it went over so beautifully. And I was so blown away writing a Jewish piece of music. And that was it. I was off and running and wrote the whole Shabbat service, and that became the Gesher album with Osei Shalom on it. So that's how it went from pop music, Nashville, thinking maybe I'll do some country music. Well, maybe this is going to be it's going to be a Christian artist recording it. Okay. And then the rabbi heard it and thought, why don't you write some Jewish music? That's kind of the roadmap.
Okay, I love it. That's super clear. And
hmm
what year was that Gesher record?
That was 2005. Can you
Okay, cool.
believe that? 20
Almost
years.
20 years.
That's crazy.
Now, and in Nashville, did you have some sort of writer's deal? Were you
hmm
independent? And to talk a little bit about
hmm
that, because a lot of people don't know how that even works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had a publishing deal for many years now with a company called Cobalt Music. I actually signed the deal with them out of their New York office, but they also have Nashville offices. Um, and basically, a music publisher acts both sort of as a songwriter's agent. They get you in the room, or they try to get you in the room with different artists, with different writers, with different producers, introduce you to people. And they also, if you're fortunate enough to have your songs recorded and released and that they do okay, it makes them a little gelt. They help you collect it properly because a song is earning money, um, depending. But when I get my statements from them, I mean, there's a little bit from Bulgaria and Romania and Poland and America and Mexico and Argentina. So we're not able to follow up with all of that. So they do this for you. But the creative side of it is, I really, when I signed, I believed in the person who wanted to sign me. They believed in me. I trusted them. And I've been with Cobalt for a really long time now, about almost, I don't know, maybe 2008, something like this.
Wow, amazing. So yeah, I think you're the first music artist I've had on here with a publishing deal. So I'm curious, how, if at all, does that cross over with the Jewish music that you compose, or is it there's non-exclusive
Okay.
situation?
Yeah, this is a really fun point. So when I did my deal, I excluded anything I write that has Jewish themes or content or Hebrew. They're not going to help me with that. And so I just excluded it.
Yeah.
So the publisher doesn't get involved, but they really appreciate it. And so what's quite interesting is I ended up really clicking with their German office in Berlin. Cobalt has offices all over the world. And I really clicked with their creative person in Germany. And so how does the pop music and the Jewish music, where do they meet? Where's the nexus? For me, and this is everything. Music, songs are bridges. They are just bridges. First, between just the writer and whatever is out there that helps you write a song, there's some bridge there. And then you have a bridge between lyric and melody. Then you have a bridge between the song and the artist, or the song and the cantor. You have a bridge between the rhythm and the rhyme. And ultimately, there's be a relationship between the writer and the performer. But then there's also the performer congregation, performer audience. So it's bridges, it's bridges, it's bridges. So when I started working in Germany, I was just waiting for the moment to share with my colleagues that I'm Jewish because I think we need to know each other. And I learned that in Germany, it's not easy for non-Jewish Germans to meet Jewish people, to go visit a synagogue. Because I had friends when once I shared that I was Jewish, and I would say, hey, let's cut out early today. It's Friday night. I'm gonna go to Shabbat, and the conversation starts. And people, our contemporaries, grandparents, great grandparents, had a very different experience in the 1930s than our relatives in Europe. So I've had the most just gut-wrenching heart to hearts with some of my co-writers in Europe about the stories that they know of their family. Some I know who are in the resistance. Uh, some who were saboteurs. In Norway, I work in Norway. Norway has such a phenomenally interesting history with Jewish people. We don't hear the good stuff too often about what happened in Norway. Norway was the last country in Europe to allow Jews to become citizens, even to enter Norway before they were citizens. But Norway was the first country to actually come to a final reparations deal with their Jewish community after the war. So it's fascinating stuff. So the nexus between pop music for me and Jewish music is that I had gone through this conversation in my mind. Should I have a Jewish website and a pop music website? And some people said, yeah, you should keep it separate. But I decided no, one website, because I want the music to be bridges. So there's one website. So there's a nexus there. And I think that the experience that I have writing pop music with the artists I work with, the competition in pop music that has to you is unbelievable. So you have to write the best song. When an album is casting songs, they might be choosing in some cases from over 1,000 or 2,000, 3,000 songs. Sometimes I've heard even 10,000. So you have to be at this incredible level. And And when I'm writing Jewish music, of course, you have to have the same because and I like to say that pop music feeds the heart for me, and Jewish music feeds the soul.
Mm.
So they go back and forth, and writing Jewish music connects you to something bigger. And so whatever that feeling is when I'm writing Jewish music, that there's a purpose behind it. I try to find that same sense of wonder, let's say, when I'm writing pop songs, even if I'm working with a 19-year-old kid and we're writing about the breakup. But I still try to remember, like, a song is a song. So yeah, I still try to approach it with that same curiosity when I'm researching a Jewish passage. Okay, I need to get to know this person went through in this break. And so somehow there's a cross-pollination happening for me.
One thing I wanted to ask you about specifically, I was going to ask you why Germany, and you answered part of that, which was,
Mhm,
really connecting with the people at Cobalt over there as well. And then the second part of that question really was in a post-October 7th world that we're all living in with this
mhm.
massive anti-Semitism waves everywhere, sort of uncovering the mask of what we thought had changed. What's been your experience living in Germany? Anything you can tell us and talk about that a bit?
Well, going back again, when I first started working there, I worked any day of the week that they could book me a session. Any day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I would work. I think my record was like 28 straight days. And then a couple years ago, I thought, when I'm in Berlin, I want to start going to Shabbat services more. So then I sat down with the publisher, we're having lunch, and I said, I want to start ending on Fridays earlier. So maybe Fridays, let's not do too many full studio sessions. Maybe it's just a meeting or this or that. I want to go to Shabbat. That's when I found out, yeah, I wanted to try to visit a synagogue, but the security outside the synagogue is so strong, I didn't think they wanted me to come. And then I met with some rabbis and shared with them, this is both not a good thing that in 2020 or whatever year it was, that average German liberal people don't know how to connect with their Jewish neighbors. Maybe they know outside of synagogue they have a Jewish neighbor. I don't know, but I've had friends tell me they wanted to visit a synagogue and they were approaching and then they were like, maybe we shouldn't. So I've shared that with some rabbis. I think this is something that still needs to be addressed there. But now post October 7th, the security, like even here, the security is needs to be so much enhanced that on the one hand, I think it's making it more difficult for average, people to meet their Jewish neighbors. But something very beautiful, the synagogue that I attend when I'm there, um, little synagogue called Frankelhofer, the local community after October 7th started to surround the front of the synagogue with candles, and the neighbors locked arm in arm to sort of stand in solidarity to provide a sense of security. So, and that I haven't been in a little while now, but as recently as a few months ago, I still saw people outside the synagogue during Shabbat services and things like this. So,
Wow. So wait, the community, the sort of non-Jewish community
mhm,
during Shabbat services
yes,
encircles the building with
yes,
candles as a
yes,
show of solidarity and
yes.
security. Wow. That's
I might be able to find some photos I took.
so all that is absolutely net positive, amazing.
Yeah, it's
Any
beautiful.
other experiences you want to talk about or things that you've
Oh,
witnessed? And I'm not like looking for bad news. I
hmm.
want to, you're there and we're
Look,
not. So
the truthfully, I haven't experienced anything negative personally there at all. If you want to know the real truth, I'm more worried here in America right now than there, because there, the funding for security comes from the government. So
mhm.
any synagogue can get, at least in Berlin, the funding is from the government for the security, and there's rings of security. But there, Look, I have great relationships with I have dear, dear, dear Muslim friends, Palestinian friends, as you know, have this project called the Pursuit of Harmony. So when during times like this, I'm calling my Palestinian friends and my Israeli friends at the same time. There's a big Muslim population in Berlin, so there's a lot of tension in the city, and there's a lot of protests, and the government there allows the protests as long as they're directed politically against the Israeli government's decisions that they make that they disagree with. Is they think if you can protest the Israeli government, you can't have an anti-Semitic march. So if the speakers cross from protesting the Israeli government into anti-Semitism, it gets shut down.
Interesting. How
That's
does
the line there. Oh, there's a huge police presence during when they know that there's a permit for a march like this. Hey, you can protest the government, but it can't cross into anti-Semitism. That's the line there.
from our perspective over here, it seems that Germany has been an advocate for Israel over the last
Absolutely.
month, like probably more than any other European country, which has been
hmm
phenomenal to observe. So that's so interesting. Anything else you want to say about that?
Well, what I would just say is I see the impact of October 7th here in the States in many ways too. And, a huge part when I talk about songs being bridges for me, after this song became a huge Christian song, I started getting invited to visit churches and to share that particular song called On My Knees, but also then to share some Jewish music, bridge, beautiful bridge in the beginning at least. And then, as I mentioned to you, I met through this Norwegian foundation. I was asked to meet with Palestinian and Israeli and Jordanian songwriters and to see if we could influential songwriters. And out of that project grew the Pursuit of Harmony. It grew out of my favorite enemy. Probably not the time to get into all of that stuff because it's just so intense, man. And we could go on, but where I was going with this was so I have big driving force behind my music, where the pop music and the Jewish music came together is when I wrote this Christian song. And then the rabbi asked for Jewish music. And then this foundation in Norway kind of heard about me, like this Jewish writer or it's Jewish or pop music. Maybe he can help bring us together some Israeli, Palestinian, Jordanian, Jewish, Christian, Muslim. Boom. So what the big impact also of October 7th is as I traveled the US doing my composer and residencies at different synagogues, the cantors, the rabbis I meet with, the interfaith initiatives in America and around the world, by the way, are all suffering because of October 7th, and that both people have been traumatized. And we're not talking to each other anymore. A lot of interfaith initiatives, for different reasons since the 7th, they've kind of been put on hold.
And when you say interfaith, do you
hmm
mean Jewish Muslim, Jewish Christian Muslim, or other
Yeah,
things?
that either Jewish Muslim or Jewish Christian Muslim.
Okay,
I think Jewish
Abrahamic
Christian,
faiths.
yeah, but Jewish Christian alliances, I think, are still, for the most part, doing okay. I think there's some instances where there's some challenges, but Jewish Muslim Christian are really challenged. And it's some of these initiatives have been going on 20 years, and there were real relationships there. We're not talking. We didn't hear. We didn't hear from our neighbors after October 7th, and now the synagogues have had threats. We haven't heard from our neighbors. We haven't heard from our neighbors. All of this goes back and forth. I'm heartened. I hear in every service that I am part of, I'm hearing our rabbis say, as we pray for the hostages return and for peace, we have to keep room in our hearts for the innocent people in Gaza who are suffering immeasurably as well. This is so important.
One thing I did notice personally
hmm
after October 7th is my many Christian friends reached out to me directly to say, "Hey, I'm so sorry for what's going on. We're praying for you. We pray for Israel." Totally unsolicited. You don't know who has your back until, situation happens. But yeah, we definitely have a lot of work to do, and for sure we could have 15 more episodes just about this one topic.
It's so critical, man. It's like this was the worst day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Period. The worst. I mean, I never imagined we'd see anything like this. In our worst moment, we have a choice too, to just go inside and put up the walls. But, and I understand that maybe in the beginning, but I think in our worst days, in our worst moments, we have to be our best. We have to be our best because if we're not speaking out, then extreme voices on both sides will fill that void and the chasm will just grow. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but when it's the worst of times, we have to dig deep and be our best.
That's a beautiful quote. Okay, so I want to transition into talking about this genre that you're in, which is being a composer in residence in different communities throughout the US. And I'm wondering if you do it in Europe as well. And I'd like you to walk us through the whole arc of the experience, both from the community's perspective and then from your perspective as the composer, so we can understand it. And then anyone that's listening to this and wants to reach out to you to bring you in, they'll have a
Sure.
sense of it.
Thank you. Yeah, it sort of grew very organically after the Gesher album came out and Osei Shalom started catching on and some of the others. I got a call from one of the first cantors was Rebecca Garfine. She was at Rhoda Shalom in New York, and she said, "Hey, our rabbi, it's his 25th anniversary at the congregation, Rabbi Levine." And I really knew Rabbi Levine because he wrote a book that blew me away called There Is No Messiah and You're It. So I knew this man and his words, and she wanted a song for his 25th. And she had an idea. She's like, I would love a Lechado D that has a gospel tinge, but still is very Jewish. Okay, I would love to do that. I wrote it. They started sharing it at their services. Then I got a call from another congregation. I believe this was Rabbi, Cantor Kerry Ben David, who was up in Westchester. He called me up, and this was something very different, and I really owe him so much. And coincidentally, I kind of grew up with his kids. We were all friends. Our Kerry and his wife and my parents were dear friends. So he said, Michael, I want you to come to the shul here, to the congregation, and I want to do a night of your music. I want you to be the musical guest. And that was the first time I visited as a musical guest outside of Nashville, I guess. Um, and we got together and we started rehearsing and it was sort of like a night with the composer of all these Jewish songs. It was amazing. I was just so touched that he wanted me to join him. And I accompanied him on piano, and his daughter is an amazing cantor, Shira Ben David, and she joined us. And then some more calls came in. And so the experience of writing, what I try to do when I'm writing for a commission is to really first get to know the history of the congregation, their musical history. I get to know the cantor very well. I get to know their voice very well. I want to write something that sits perfectly, not only in their range, but in their wheelhouse. So I want to get to know their voice and their range, but also the sweet spot. And I always ask the cantor, send me your two favorite vocals you've ever sung, and send me your least favorite vocal you've ever sung.
I love
And I,
it.
and I want to see, I want to really get to know their voice. And what you learn, the more specific you get in your writing, whether it's lyrically or musically, the more specific you get, the more universal you get. So I get to know their voice, and then we start talking about what piece of liturgy do you want a new adaptation of? Sometimes it's very clear. I did a song for Emmanuel Denver last year. It was their 150th anniversary as a congregation. Rabbi Joe Black called me and said, I want a new Psalm 150. Done deal. I would love that. And as you know, Psalm 150 is very musical. the psalm itself talks a lot about music. And I love these psalms that bring music so right into it. Praise with the lute and the tambourine, the stringed instrument, all of this. This is evidence, written evidence for guys like us that music was even way back, was such a critical part of elevating the Jewish experience. So I love this song. And there are others too. I just did last week is Psalm 98, which also speaks of musical instruments in the synagogue and in Jewish worship, we should say. So I did, but sometimes Cantor will say, I'm not sure. Um, Kind of would love a new Lachadodi, but I'm also would love. So I like when I get a choice. Maybe it could be Lachadodi, or it could be a new Michamocha, and then I can live with it. And as I get to know their voice more and more, and I'll tune into their services online and really get a sense, something, if I have a choice, something will naturally rise. And I'll just hear their voice in my head. I'll hear the character's voice singing a phrase of L'chadodi. And boom, then that's off and running. Cantor Shira Ginsburg, the first piece, I've written 10 pieces for her. She did 10 song commission, and then I became composer in residence for, I think, 3 years there. And the first piece was going to be a test. Let's see if it really works. And in my head, I'm thinking, anything but L'chadodi. I don't, please. I already have a few of them. There's over 2,000 documented L'chadodi, documented.
Wow.
And there's so much Hebrew. It's not an easy one to write because the Hebrew has to scan. And congregations, Reform, we don't know the Hebrew so well. I thought anything but. She goes, okay, for the first piece, I want a new Chadadi. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, Shira, I was just praying that you wouldn't choose it. I'm like, why? So why do you want a new Chadadi? There's so many to choose from. There's so many. She's like, I know, but I don't know. Oh, I need something different. So, okay, how can we do this differently? What can we do different? And I started researching, and I couldn't really find a Chadadi in English. And so we started talking about it. And I started researching L'chadodi. It's a baby of a prayer. I mean, it was written 500 years ago, basically. Christopher Columbus was sailing around. It's a baby. And you can read so much about that period of time, the Kabbalists, and all of it. And so this L'chadodi isn't so much a translation. It keeps the Hebrew refrain, this chorus, but the verses are in English. It talks about the first verse is, the fields grow dark, the day is done. We gather neath the setting sun. Well, just hours before, these Jewish people were in the fields toiling and cultivating the fields. Then they went home, they put on their white garb, and they went back to those same fields to usher in Shabbat. Those evening stars are really little sparks of holiness, sparks of holiness. The Kabbalists believe that when God created the world, he infused his wisdom and his compassion and his infinity in these clay vessels, but they couldn't contain it. Sparks flew everywhere. There's a belief that it's our job to collect these holy sparks that have been lodged in the material world and elevate them again. And also that these evening stars of Shabbat could be these holy sparks that formed during creation. So we talk about the prayers, we research it. Next week, I'm doing a piece based on Exodus 15:2. Talk to the rabbi about it. Why 15:2? And get their input. And did you ever do a sermon on 15:2? Send it to me. Did you ever hear a sermon? Like, what is it? Send me why this piece, when you're on the Bima, you're thinking, I need a new Lachadadi. I need a new this. I need a Exodus 15:2. Like, I want to get into it. And then all of that marinates, pollinates, germinates, sits like a little seed in the soil, and then it just starts to pop out of the dirt and a little piece of melody comes about. And then this process happens before I visit a synagogue. And then when the piece, we know what the date is, or maybe it's for the opening of the new building or whatever. So it has to be done on time. Then I go, And when I visit a congregation, I get there usually on a Wednesday, so we have plenty of time to rehearse Wednesday night, Thursday, Friday. Maybe we have the temple musicians or a professional band with us or the kids choir. We need time. I like to do musical directing when I visit a congregation and try to see what I can do to lift their musical program and to give input. I do a lot of vocal production in the pop world in studio, so maybe I can help. Cantor doesn't like to use their lower mid register, and I think, my God, you're missing out. I just heard you sing there. Let's pull more of that out of you. So there'll be musical directing, and we'll do a Shabbat service together where we'll debut the new piece. I'll accompany them on some of their community's favorite pieces. We'll add some of my newer pieces or older pieces of mine. Saturday, Sunday, I'll do a Q&A, and I'll give a presentation with the cantor or the rabbi on how the song was written, why the song was written, what input did I get from the clergy. Um, and we'll take questions and just give it's kind of one part master songwriting class and one part deep dive into the underlying liturgy. And sometimes we'll do a Saturday evening concert program. Everything gets tailored. Every synagogue is different, but that's the bones of what a composer in residence with me feels like. The most precious part to me is we've been working on Zoom, myself and the cantor. And I'll call them and say, hey, let me hear you sing this bit of melody. I'll send them a piece of music, some of the words. Okay, I'm going to bring it up a half step. Okay, I'm going to bring it down a half step, but I think it feels good. I like what it's doing with your voice. Do you like it? Yes. Let's keep, okay, I'm going to go down this path. And then I walk into the synagogue 6 months later, 3 months later, a year later, or whatever it is. We sit down and we play the song together for the first time. And it's just how we feel like we've known each other our entire lives. I can't even explain it. When you and I met for the first time for Yona Klieger's installation,
Oh, yeah.
that's when we met 2 years ago about, Yona had commissioned a piece 2 years before that during the pandemic. And then we became friends through this process. And I walked in, you came for rehearsal, I think Thursday night. Thursday afternoon, he and I met for the first time. And it was already like we knew each other. But then we sat down and played the piece that was now 2 years old. And we just sat there in silence afterwards. Like, that's the first time we've played this piece of music together. Felt like grew up making music our whole lives. There's no words.
Yeah, I love it. I mean,
Yeah,
it really just bridges time, and it's so intimate, whether it's music or prayer or even meditation in silence, which is a whole nother story I could go on for a long time about how sitting with someone in silence is like so intimate. But because you're so thoughtful in your approach and really do a deep dive into not only the community's history, but the person's history and their music and their musicality, and you're not flying by the seat of your pants. You really like dive deep in there. So I'm sure for them, when they hear it, they're hearing themselves. They're hearing, like, from your perspective, their best version of themselves. And so it's both aspirational in nature and deeply connected in structure.
absolutely. You can hear it as your story. But if you knew from the conversations, you like it, you said it perfectly. Like you can hear himself in it, and I love it. That moment when you play it together for the two is just man. It's like old friends reuniting after years apart kind of feeling. It's something so special. I love it. Like I learned so much from the cantor, from the rabbi when we dig into these prayers together. You uncover something new about a prayer we've known our entire lives. Find one new thing, whether it's some new interpretation that you discover, whether it's just finding a new rhythm to the words that just something new approach and to study with different these rabbis and cantors on the piece of music they want. It's so beautiful. I can't words. So I put it to music.
Sweet. Yeah, there's a saying, and I think in the Agada, the Talmud, which is, you turn over a piece of Torah 100 times, and it's on the 101st
Mm.
time that you really have the chidush, which means the novel insight. Similarly with these prayers, it seems like, from what I've heard, what you said, mostly it's centered around Kabbalat Shabbat, Friday evening Mariv services. And so my question is, what's the most esoteric piece of liturgy
Mm.
you've been asked to write about that
Oh
maybe,
man.
Erev Shabbat?
Sure. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Great question. I have a for the high holidays, we return to you, and Avinu Malkeinu, we return to you. Something again, it is a part of the Shabbat liturgy, but we use it a lot also throughout the year. And I have a mourners Kaddish that the esoteric component of it would be here in the mourners Kaddish, like we all did. And it's in our DNA. Mourners Kaddish is in DNA. Even if you don't understand the Hebrew, the Aramaic, actually, you know that it's a mourning song and it just takes you to a place. But I remember as a child and as a teenager, maybe more as a teenager, reading the English translation and time of great sorrow and loss. And maybe it was a very teenage approach was why are we just praising, praising, praising
Right.
during this time? Why is it there's something more comforting in the why is there something that makes me feel more connected to the person that I've lost? So 5 years ago, I was asked to write a song, a, a mourner's song. And this was actually part of the East End Temple um, project. And so I ended up taking Mourner's Kaddish as the first verse, part of it, because it would be very long, part of Mourner's Kaddish. And then I was sitting in the sanctuary in Nashville thinking, what's the approach to this piece? And I just started reading, 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 reading. And the chorus or refrain on the piece, I pulled from Psalm 23, Ki ata imadi, for you are here with me. So, Yitgadal v'yikadash me rabban, Ki ata imadi, for
Mm.
you are here with me. And it, it's like light because first of all, for you are here with me, you immediately God or the person who has passed. And then I wrote an English verse for the second verse instead of going back to the Hebrew. I wrote an English verse. Like the waves upon the sea are separate and connected, you are gone, but still by my side.
Mm.
As the seasons change, dust we must return again. But love, love, love never dies.
Oh,
Kiata MID for your. So this maybe there was something about taking one of Judaism's most central prayers that we hear our entire lives. So when you said esoteric, it just there was the process of working with that prayer and not leaving it entirely intact. And there was something about that process that felt more out of the box. But it's becoming one of the most, um, it's really finding its way into a lot of communities and hearts right now. I'm getting, people are sending me MP3s or links to their services so I can see, and it's just called a mourner song.
Femme beautiful. I love it. And I've often thought that as well about Mourner's Kaddish. Like if you read the English, it's the most loving, aspirational, praiseworthy set of praises. It mentions nothing about death or mourning or the person
Hmm.
you've lost or anything. And there's many theories as to why, but it's
Hmm.
fascinating. It's cool that you took a
It's
different.
fascinating, and it's hard. Like for me, at least, it was really hard when okay, we've just lost the closest person to me, and this is the prayer, and I feel good saying it because it's just, you've heard it your whole life. But when I really read the words, sometimes I feel not always satisfied, to be honest with you.
No, I think it's great. I was in shul this morning and there were people saying Kaddish and I was thinking about, there's a theory that the Baal Shem Tov said that we know Jews believe in reincarnation, and right, and that we reincarnate for the sole purpose of doing one mitzvah, one favor, one good deed, right? But we don't know what that one is, so you never know. That's why you want to do as many as possible because you don't know which one it is. And he says, and sometimes reincarnate just to say the Yehei Shmei Rabbah, which is the community's response to the mourner, right? So I think there's even larger than the words there's this element of communal witnessing, right? It's that
Yes.
we see
Yes.
you as a mourner, whether these words are saying that specifically, this is embedded into our community, which is what makes it so powerful. Bearing witness.
And along those lines, so it's important to me when I'm in a service, um, and I think I even put it in the book, my anthology with Transcontinental. After playing it a few times in services, I realized I always want to recite the Mourner's Cottage first and then sing this prayer.
Yeah,
I think they go together. It's not in lieu of. It's something to follow it and give it another shade to the same words.
beautiful. I love
Mhm.
it. Well, we could definitely talk for many, many hours, and I appreciate your time. And there's so much wisdom and artistry embedded into how you even describe things, let alone your actual music. So people can learn a lot from how you said what you said. And I have two final questions. One,
Sure.
is there anything else that you want to cover, something that you have coming up, coming out, or we should know about so we can
Yeah.
turn our eyes in that direction?
Oh, I'm just so excited. I mean, there's so much. I'm gonna also, I guess, if I say this, then I'm committing to it. So I'll say it for the first time out loud. Going to do my next Jewish album this year. It's been 5 years. Uh, the last one came out in 2020. It was the music of East End Temple that they commissioned, Cantor Shear Ginsburg. So it is time. I have so much new music and I'm committing to putting out an album this year. So that's coming up, and I'm so excited to do this. Have a
That's
lot of concepts bubbling around. I haven't figured out the final concept yet, but something's coming.
beautiful. Well, we look forward to that. And the question that I always ask every guest on the Holy
Okay.
Sparks podcast is this.
Okay, give it to me.
Michael, what does the Jewish world need now most and why?
Mm, okay. I think internally, because of October 7th right now, we are sadly, there's a lot of division within the Jewish world. When I used to travel to communities, it was, we don't know how to talk to our Muslim neighbors. I don't know what to say. I don't want to say the wrong thing. They were insulting me, or whatever, or I insulted them. And the conversation was, how do we talk to our Muslim neighbors? We know we need to, but we're not sure. How can you help us? Now, wherever I visit, it's hard for Jews to talk to each other about. It starts with the response to it's all around October 7th. And so within our small community, we're dividing ourselves. I've never seen it like this before. So what do we need? I think we need to realize that when we're talking about how to support Israel, because usually this divide comes because we have a disagreement on how to support Israel and who's the strongest supporter of Israel. And I think we have to catch our breath because I've had people text me that I am the worst Jew. And because I can hold space open, that I'm the worst, because I can hold some space open for my Palestinian friends who are suffering immeasurably at the same time. And, or because I can question some of Israel's response. And that makes me terrible. And I think we have to step back and say, we all could support Israel in different ways. And actually, that combination of support maybe is what's needed. If it's this monolith, then look, we're people who argue. We struggle. Israel struggle. So we could struggle with what's the how to support Israel, but I think we have to recognize that deep down, everyone is trying to support Israel in the way that they think works for them or makes sense to them, and really provides support. I feel over the last 15 years, I visited the region over 25 times. Every visit, I would share the time partially with my Israeli friends, then I would cross the Kalandia checkpoint and spend time in there. A few, half the trip, 4 days in Israel with my Israeli friends, 4 days traveling through Ramallah and visiting friends in Hebron and Nablus with my Palestinian friends. And I will tell you, when I visit my friends on the other side of that checkpoint, I feel so connected to being Jewish. I feel like I'm living welcome the stranger in your midst, or however translation we want. Like I feel like we have to know our neighbors for things to get better. And they have to know us. So I feel that that's something I can do. And it is supporting Israel. At the same time, it's maybe supporting my friends, my Palestinian friends, but it's both. And I think allowing ourselves to become divided and to constantly argue and to this is exactly what the most extreme voices want. Maybe on, and I don't like to say on both sides. I hate the word sides. I don't like using the word sides. I think so I would just say dividing ourselves as such a small minority, that's exactly what some people want. And why fall right into that trap? We can have different opinions on to support Israel. We should be talking about it. Instead, we're not even talking about it. We need to be talking more. We need facilitators who can bring us together um, and make sure we have conversations that don't devolve, but that evolve. Um, this is, I think, the most important thing right now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. That was beautiful. And I think if I could summarize what you just said, it's the theme of Achdut. It's unity. It's coming together, right? So I
I,
always want to end with a blessing.
I was going to just thank you for inviting me today and for your really thoughtful questions and guiding the conversation into some places that I don't think I would have taken it naturally. And I'm really appreciative of that and for your, giving me a chance to share a little bit and to get to know you better also in the process. Beautiful.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Okay, so I want to end with a blessing, as I do with all guests on the podcast, that Hashem should bless you with continued energy, resolve, deep communication with the communities you're connecting to, both within the Jewish world and outside and around the Jewish world. And that not only your music, but your life should be a gesher, should be a bridge, right? This whole life that we have is just this one tiny little kaddish. It's a one little transition. It's one bridge between one world and the next. And that within that, you're operating in between different worlds and as a bridge between different worlds, not only bridging the communities with music, with prayer, but with yourself and with the outside world, but with other communities as well. And that you have this unique gift to be able to weave in and out of these different spaces, which is, given by God to you. And you're definitely utilizing all the gifts that Hashem has given you. And I think it's great to not only witness it, to hear it, to have it impact our community, but to see it growing and to see you having hatzlacha, which is success. So it should continue in good health. And thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, my friend. Let's do it again. This was really fun and enlightening for me too.
All right, we'll see you on the next episode of the Holy Sparks podcast.